Have you ever wondered why certain decks pair together so nicely, while others just don't seem to fit? In today's video, we will be discussing the magic behind deck pairings, how they work, ways it can enhance your readings, and why you should try it. I'll be following a set of 4 questions from the tag Convince Me to Pair Decks by Wilderness Whispers ASMR. So thank you so much for tagging me in this. I'm really excited to talk about deck pairings. It is something that I have talked about rather often on my channel, and it is just a natural part of my practice. So if you're curious about more on deck pairings from me, I will go ahead and link some videos down below in the description, and you can check those out if you're interested. So let's get right into these prompts and start looking at these deck pairings. I am so excited for these. I had a lot of fun putting them together. Let's talk about prompt 1. Why do you pair your decks? There's a few reasons why I love pairing my decks. The biggest reason is that I feel like it expands the story, it expands the message of the cards. Each different deck that I bring into the spread, that I bring into the reading, feels like it's giving me a different perspective or a different opinion versus using the same deck for a 3-card spread. Including multiple decks allows you to find other messages, deeper meaning through repeated patterns, elements, colors, and imagery. Beyond expanding the story and the message through pairing decks, I also really love the way it expands the visual storytelling across the decks. We can use this to go deeper into the visual world of the cards. So taking the center card, which has a very stripped down visual, I really love using a busier deck with a more simplified styled deck. So I could use the more minimal one to dive deeper into the more detail focused, detail heavy deck. It's almost like imagining and building this world from the spread. That is what visual storytelling does for me. It is allowing me to expand the visuals of the decks that I wouldn't necessarily be able to dive into if I were to use just the 3 cat cards across in the spread. This allows me to look into the flora and fauna, perhaps, into the scenes here of the cat one. We can think about this repeated element of this light, of this sparkle, which we could see here on both of those cards. So it gives a bit more of a focus or a draw, a small sign of, hey, this is a repeating pattern. This is something that's showing. Maybe think about this a little more. It just takes some imagination, and I love that aspect of deck pairing. And lastly, I love to use my decks, and I have a decent sized collection. So pairing my decks, using them in deck edits, which is a way that I curate a smaller group of decks and use that for a set period of time, allows me to cycle through my collection and get to know my decks without feeling the pressure of needing to do a deck study and only use this one deck for this set amount of time. It's a nice way to just chip away at getting to know your decks. So overall, why I pair decks is to expand the message, to expand the story. I get to have these different opinions or perspectives brought in. The artwork can speak to each other in a different way versus had I not used them together. It adds this layer of a visual narrative, almost like you're reading a storybook. All those beautiful, rich illustrations. You're wandering through these worlds. It's the same way for me. You're wandering through these very lusciously illustrated, artful cards. And of course, to use the decks. For the second prompt, how do you pair your decks? First and foremost, you need to identify the purpose of the reading and your reading style. So do you want to go for pairing just tarot decks with tarot decks? Or would you like to incorporate a tarot deck with an oracle deck? Or you could even pair oracle and oracle decks together. So once you've decided on that, then there's a few ways that I go about pairing my decks. Overall, the decks need to speak to one another, and that can be done in a variety of ways. One of those ways is visually. So for me, that means the styles, like the photography styles in both of these decks, and the elements feel cohesive. It feels like they belong together. The smaller oracle deck here definitely has a very hazy, dreamy, blurry, a little melancholy at times energy, and that pairs really well with the Somnia's visuals. The Somnia visual here gets to be the strong focal point in the spread, and this oracle deck is just filling in some of that visual story. It allows a balance to happen with the visual hierarchy here, so we can focus on the tarot narrative for the heavy lifting of this reading. And visually, they don't feel like they're clashing or contrasting. It feels very cohesive. It's from the same world. It has a similar style and energy visually. It allows a little bit of room for contrast as well, because this oracle here definitely is more modern feeling with the subject matter of the photography and the styling, while the Somnia definitely has its own vibe of a world. So it does a nice job of pushing and pulling old with new, and it blends really well together. Here would be an example of what I would say wouldn't work for how decks visually pair together. Of course, this may totally work for you, and that's great. I'm just using this as one example for this concept of visually pairing decks. The clash of the illustration style with the photography is first and foremost very jarring for me. It also is coming from two different areas of fantasy. This one's very much more subdued. It feels a bit more deeper, darker. This is a bit more like silly, haha, indie cartoony kind of feeling. Lots of animal inclusion. So they are just missing the mark on multiple levels of why they aren't going together visually. And for me, that is something that does matter in my reading style and the way I like to set up my spreads. So the visually connecting part may not be a hang up or a reason for you. Another facet to the way I pair my decks would be thematically. So for these two, they are very nature, earth, eco focused. And because they have such strong use of greens, hitting that visual mark for me as well. So that means thematically, it's either the concept or there's a mood, the story, the vibe. They all share a similar connection point. There's a thread through them. You know, it feels purposeful. This would be a nature theme. It feels purposeful for the two decks I selected. It creates unity and it feels grounded. It feels like it was meant to be together. And it's a really great way to hone in on a theme you want to do a reading on, perhaps. Maybe this is something that you want to feel more grounded about. You're seeking some guidance around that. That's why I was saying before, like, identify the purpose of the reading, and it doesn't have to be some sort of thesis, just so you can have a vibe of like what the energy you're seeking. So you're setting yourself up for success with your reading. It just gives a point of like how to connect and pair decks. So we have visually, they can pair. So here visually, the greens and the nature visuals. And then we have thematically now, which we would say the same thing. There's this eco theme, there's this nature theme. Therefore, we're putting these two together. Of course, that doesn't mean you have to pair same theme decks together for every reading. This is just a method to the equation on how to pair decks. Here would be an example of what wouldn't work for me thematically when pairing my decks. This center card here lives in a too far abstract, different world than this oracle deck. So their themes are clashing for me. We're going too far fantasy with too far reality. And then visually, they are jarring for me as well. Even though we're getting this nice draw of blues across all three cards, for me, the biggest reason why these wouldn't work is because thematically, they just live in two different worlds. Now, if you wanted to do a reading where you are working through these two different worlds, these two different solutions or messages, then it might be more of a reason and a purpose to select two decks that clash or contrast in a way. But I still think there's a way to make those still feel in sync and live in a bigger picture while still being able to have that contrast. The last way that I pair decks together would be tonally. So that's like how they read together, like how the different elements fit together, but mostly how they speak together. Are they speaking the same language? So this one's a bit of a mix of how are the messages, how are the cards reading in the spread together on a message level, on that meaning level. And then we can add in our previous two ways of pairing decks would be visually, thematically, and now we have tonally. So visually, these play together really well. We have this very muted color palette on the tarot here, and it allows this more colorful card, which it's still very subdued in its colors as well, to really be the pop in the spread. Really allows that bright contrast in the spread visually that allows your eye to focus on it. And then thematically, we have this like darker line undertone to the visuals across here. So this more heavier tone dark plays really well into this soft toned darkness. And I think that's a really interesting juxtaposition to play with. Visually, it is really delicious. I absolutely love putting these two together. I just discovered it for this video and I'm thrilled. And for an example that wouldn't work for me tonally would be, well, not just the size difference here. I think size differences are great when we're doing in a much bigger patchwork, mix and match style spread. But just for a 3-card spread here, unless you want to use size as a reason and a purpose into your spread and reading, then of course, by all means. But they just feel like they're speaking from two different worlds. They're coming from two different of perspectives and opinions here that it's not really correlating and it's feeling more clashy for me. So not only are the visuals feeling too different, too at odds in different worlds, the visual storytelling isn't there for me either. And it would just be one that I wouldn't gravitate towards using. Of course, once again, this may totally work for you, and that is great. I am just trying to give a concrete example of ways that pairing decks work for me in a more logical step-by-step solution. This is just one way to find an answer for how to pair decks. Okay, so for the third prompt, we have how many decks do you usually include in one reading? Well, for me, it really depends on the things I've mentioned before. What's my mood? What's my purpose? What's my reasoning? What sort of time commitment can I have? And what's my space allowed? Like all of these things play a factor and it can change day to day. But like for the reasons I stated before, I love being able to use my decks and rotate through them. I love all the extra layers of visual storytelling and a way to continue to expand the message and the reading through multiple different decks. So here we have 4 different decks, and I feel like anywhere between 3 and 4 decks is pretty average for me of doing a reading. If I wanted to do something much quicker, I would probably only use 2 decks in a 3-card spread. But there's a ritual to pulling out the decks, setting the boxes aside, how you prep your space, how you work through a reading, what type of spread you like to use. All of these are comforts for us. They're a positive part of the experience. They play into the reading. So sometimes I really want to just sit and play with decks, and pairing decks in a bigger spread in a reading is a fabulous way to go about that. And I show 10 different spreads in this deck edit where these decks came from. That is in my spring into summer deck edit. And there's a ton of amazing colorful decks in there and really great mix and match spreads and way to use decks. So check that out if you're liking this vibe here. So the final prompt is to do an example reading with the decks that are being paired. So I figured we'll just use this spread, use these decks for the example reading. So I'll walk you through the way I worked through that spread we just looked at with these decks. And let's just do something really simple and straightforward for this example reading on how to pair decks together, right? How about we ask the cards, how can I shake this feeling of not being good enough? So we will start in this spread. Like I've talked before in many other videos, I love to start with a top center as my foundation point in the reading. Okay, so we pulled courage. It takes courage to put yourself out there. It's often a silent thing. It can feel like it goes unnoticed. And so you really start questioning yourself if you're doing the right thing or if you're good enough, right? But if we think about why we're doing it, and the reason should be because we're passionate, we're happy to do it, we love all these positive effects that come from it. It's this burst of creativity for us, for social relationships. It brings this spark to our life. Okay, so let's keep building on that. We are going to bring in the next deck now. So remember, this one sat right under this oracle here, and I use this as a continuing message off of this base foundation message that this courage card came from. So we're really playing into now, how can we expand on this idea of courage when we aren't feeling like we're good enough, when we're having second guesses, when we're not feeling as confident as we deserve to be for ourselves. So let's see how we can expand that. And I really like using this deck because it has phrases instead of a single keyword. So it really allows to add a lot more footing to this single keyword card. Action leads to success. Just as we were talking about with courage, putting ourselves out there brings this jolt of energy, whatever that may be for you. And in order to get that jolt, in order to get that burst, that boost, we have to take action step by step, piece by piece. One small thing after the next small thing equals a much bigger thing that you wouldn't have been at had you not started with all those smaller steps. We can see that through the multiple images of the dragon here, really giving that sense of abundance through success. I love this idea that the lightning bolt is now jolting down through this cloudy sky, allowing these dragons to just continue to like flying on their way, winning, winning, winning. Let's see what else the cards want to say. So once again, we're sitting at, okay, it can feel tough, it can feel bad, but we really just have to keep moving forward. We have to keep trying. That is how we reach our goal. So let's bring in these little side pieces I like to do in my spreads. And while this one's a smaller spread, I would add a lot more layers here, but I'll just give you a taste of how I like to go about this. So for this like left here and this right here, it will almost be like two different directions or two different ideas, two different somethings. Sometimes they blend and match and you see a repetition in message, so you know, okay, that's clear. Sometimes it gives us two different offerings, two different ideas. So let's see. We are going to bring in a third different deck now. Okay, so we're going to build out these left and right sides here in the spread. It is just going to add a little bit more dimension, a little bit more story to how we can work through this feeling, how we can continue to push ourselves forward, to keep putting ourselves out there, and to not let that self-doubt take over. For our left side of the spread, we have the 9 of Hearts here. This is a really amazing indicator to indulge that you are on the right path. You are doing the right thing. You're heading in the right direction. Your wishes of where you're trying to get to, of where you're headed, are coming to fruition. Keep going. So see how we can keep playing into this. We have another reminder of abundance, of all this plentiful good for us. So we have this repeated element of many things, which really shows to keep going. You're working towards those rewards. Each step is getting you there. For our right side, we have the 6 of Diamonds. So this is a great reminder that there's always going to be this give and take throughout the process here. There are going to be highs, there are going to be lows, but you really need to know and figure out and feel for yourself when it means to push forward into action and when to maybe step back and to relax and to look at the bigger picture and slow down. So we have these two different ideas here with how to push ourselves forward when we're having all that self-doubt, when we're feeling down, when we're not feeling good enough. On one hand, on this left side, we have the idea of like, just keep pushing forward because you're already working through your success. It's here, enjoy it. And on the right side here is a bit more of an acknowledgement of, hey, there's going to be those times of not feeling good enough, of making mistakes, of feeling like you didn't do the right thing or can't ever do the right thing, and when to ask for help, when to sit back and allow that help, or to take action. So we have the give and take here, and we have the rewards here. So it's almost like a bit of a warning. We can't keep plowing through to always be good. We do have to take the bad with the good as well. Okay, very interesting. Now let's cap this off with the fourth deck, just to reaffirm what we gathered from these cards on the left and the right here. So you can see how we've been working through this like building blocks, piece by piece. We have a purpose, we have a reason, and we can see where these elements are repeating. Once again, we have 3 cards that have many different smaller pieces to them. And then we have this big, bold center card with this single bolt, almost like it's blasting down and exploding with these 3 cards here into these little different pieces. This is how I play with the visual storytelling when I'm pairing decks. So let's just add this fun little word deck. It is so colorful. I love it. And let's just see how we can kind of clarify things, how we can just put a nice little summary on each side here. That is how I love to do these sorts of spreads. So for our left side of the spread here, we have confidence. So this is really reaffirming of that. Put pedal to the metal, put on that gas, and go. Like, this is the action heavy side. Feel the confidence, own your confidence, and just keep plugging forward and keep your head down. You are good enough. You are already there. Now this is funny. Slow down. For the right side, where we were already getting this feeling, this message of like, there's this give and take, we have the go, go, go. But what about when you need to slow down? When you need to acknowledge those low points for yourself, when you need to just feel that, work through that, and then get ready to give again. That's how I would read these 4 decks in this spread. Of course, it's just one way to do it. This was just one interpretation of the cards. You could have read this in endless ways. But I think this is a great way to think about pairing decks, is like building the story visually and message-wise as well. And we can just like keep adding in those layers. Think about things visually. This works visually for me because, one, there's a lot of bold, saturated color. So color-wise, they play off of each other really well. Style-wise, we have these 3 illustration styles, and they both have an imperfect line work style. The line work is black, and then there's colored filled in there, so they're similar in that way. These 2 decks are detailed enough where they kind of play off of each other and feel similar, where this one's very minimal, so that contrast allows the visual hierarchy to have this minimal card kind of feel like a lot more than it is, and allowing you to slow down and look at the artwork and the finer details on these busier cards. So they play really well that way as well. And then, of course, even the typography on these guidance cards here have a thin, darker outline around the text. So it even has line work and a stroke around it that plays into the illustration style as well. They feel like they come from a similar enough world visually as well, and they feel like they can speak a similar language. So this is how it really works for me. And I hope this example reading helped you to see how different decks can interact with one another in one cohesive way. I wanted to show one more example here as we wrap up this video. I love these 2 together. They definitely live in a world for me. I love this sort of like darker, shadowy tones they both have. They live in this very similar fantasy world. And the finer details in this oracle really play into the lavish worlds that the tarot is in. it's just a visual delight for me. So thanks for hanging out with me through this tag. Thanks again for Wilderness Whispers ASMR for tagging me in this. Really appreciate that. I always love talking about pairing decks. I hope I was able to give a bit more of some concrete examples and solutions on how to pair decks and the way that it could work. Like I said multiple times, this is just how it works for me and the way that I find the most success and joy in pairing decks. You'll have to let me know in the comments below how you feel about pairing decks and what are some ways that it works for you. But until next time, I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.